So let me start at the very beginning. Why do we even think about risk? It's because we live in an uncertain world. And uncertainty underpins all of this. If we lived in a completely certain world, we would know what was going to happen. We would know what the consequences of those events would be. It would be very, very easy to plan for risk. We wouldn't need this concept of risk necessarily. So uncertainty. There's lots of definitions. This is a very broad definition of uncertainty. You could drive a truck through this definition. But I like it because it sort of sets the stage. It's any departure from the unachievable ideal of complete determinism, right? We don't live in a completely deterministic world, so it's any departure. And that could be from, is it going to rain tomorrow versus is the stock market going to crash next year? All of these are uncertain questions. There's very different levels of consequence associated with those, and that's what we'll talk about here in the next several slides, is sort of systematically thinking through how we evaluate those types of risks and consequences. There's sort of, broadly speaking, two families of uncertainty. There's just what we call aleatoric uncertainty, which is just random events. There's random processes in the world, and that leads to some sort of uncertainty in whether something will occur, the timing of that occurrence, how the magnitude of that type of event or impact. And then there's limited knowledge. We just don't know some stuff about the world. We can't even conceive of what types of information we would need to know about that. So this is sort of the Rumsfeldian unknown unknowns, if you can think of that. Yeah. So to systematically think about and deal with uncertainty, we have this concept of risk. And this is a concept that's been around for a really long time, but economists started thinking through how do we systematically think about risk starting in the 19-teens, 1920s. So Frank Knight was a professor at the University of Chicago and sort of came up with the first working definition of risk as something that derives from random adverse events with probabilities of occurrence that can be statistically calculated. And so this gets back to one of the earlier questions, that we have some event, there's some likelihood that that event will occur, and we can assign a number to that. What's the probability that that event is going to occur? This has evolved over decades and decades and decades into this more modern definition of a measure of probability and severity of adverse effects of some event. And what this boils down to is that equation that Gayatri showed on her slides of risk being a function of the do I have a laser here? I do have a laser. Risk is a function of the likelihood or the probability of an event's occurrence and the consequences of that event.